So what do you get when you have a reef aquarium and you're gone from that aquarium for 3 months? Let's find out. Alright, so before we go upstairs, I want to give you guys a little bit of a background. I've been away from my system for about 3 months at my home out of state, 1,000 miles away. I did a few videos sharing my new upgrades to the new aquarium that I'm building at that place there. So now I'm back, and while I was gone, number one, my Apex unit's running the system. Secondly, I need intelligent intervention, human hand to go into the tank and actually do maintenance. So my friend Matt, who used to be the owner of a fish store here in town, has since moved on to the private sector, has watched my tank for the last 5 years. Typically, I'm gone 2 to 3 weeks at the most, and Matt's able to come over once a week to do the maintenance and water changes, change out filter socks, and drain the skimmer, and you know, the minor maintenance that we all do. This time I'm gone for 3 months. Well, Matt's got a full-time job. He has a social life, so I'm putting a burden on him to have to come over every week or every other week to do maintenance on the tank for that long of a time, 3 months. About a month and a half ago, I'm at home and I get an alert from my Apex saying that the salinity is dropped below its normal range. And not only did it drop below its normal range, it dropped from 35 parts per thousand all the way down to 31 parts per thousand. Now, I knew Matt was at the house doing maintenance on the aquarium because he had called prior to that. So a part of me kind of blew it off, but a part of me was like, why would the salinity drop? About 15 minutes later, he calls me and explains that he did a water change but ended up putting mostly fresh water into the tank after having dumped out the salt water for the water change from the main display. And what had happened was, the week prior to this incident, he came over, did a water change, everything was fine, but he forgot to fill up the salt water mixing bin with new salt water and allow it to cycle and get clear for the next week that he comes back. It's all ready to go and warmed up. On this particular day where the issue occurred, Matt came over, had put water, fresh water, into the salt mixing station and never added the salt. He forgot. And so when I forgot how many gallons he did, but when he did the water change, he dumped in a bunch of fresh water. So salinity dropped from 35 parts per thousand, like I said, all the way to 31 parts per thousand in a matter of seconds. Matt also received an Apex alert because he's an authorized user of my Apex and realized, he made a mistake. And so the only thing we could do at this point to correct it was take the little amount of water that we had left over and do hypersalinity, just elevate the salinity of that little bit of water that we had left over. He mixed it for just a little while. Aqua vitro salt needs to be mixed for at least 24 hours to get clear. Otherwise, it's just really a dirty type of salt to initially when you're mixing it, especially if you add too much salt all at once. So he did the hypersalinity and dumped that water in. Now in the sump where the auto top off is, say this is the level, anything that falls below it, the auto top off would activate. We filled it up above the level line, so that way the auto top off isn't going off during the time this water is evaporating, and in the meantime the salinity is going up. So it took about 5 days for the salinity to go from 31 parts per thousand to 35 parts per thousand, or at least level out. Unfortunately, the salinity issue wasn't the only human error that was caused while I was gone. There was another issue that we'll get into later in the video. Right now, let's go upstairs and take a look to see what the results were from that salinity drop. So the first thing I noticed when I walked in was the sound that the overflow was making. And that was as a result of the emergency drain taking on water and the primary drain down here, that's the emergency right here, the primary drain down there being plugged up. Probably from the bubble algae that broke loose and went down the drain. Not that big of a deal. I've never had a flood issue. This has happened on several occasions in the past. Now the fix is to open up the gate valve all the way so that whatever is clogged in there drops down into the filter sock below. However, this time when I turned it, this gate valve was frozen. This is a BRS gate valve that's going on 4.5 years old and been exposed to the humidity underneath the sump. So you see the screw here, oops, the screw here is actually rusted out. And I tried to get a screwdriver to loosen it. However, because it's so rusted, the metal was just breaking off and the screw itself wasn't loosening up. So what I did was I used all my force and just tried to break that free, and in doing so, water started pouring out from the back of the gate valve and down into the sump. So that didn't work. So the next thing I did is turned off my return pump, and then I undid this union here, and I guess that relieved some water pressure that was built up above the union, because I was then able to freely turn this and get the gate valve to open up all the way. So I will be putting on a new Spears gate valve on the new build, but this lasted me almost 5 years and it was exposed to the humidity in the sump area. So all in all, I would say that this was a pretty good deal here with about a 5-year lifespan if you use it the way I did. Now the second thing I noticed, because the overflow was making gurgling sounds and it forced me to look down in here, was the amount of bubble algae that was growing in here, along with hair algae. The other thing I noticed was that there were no aptasias in here. Now the aptasia in the overflow can get, up to 2 inches. They're huge, massive heads, and I just kind of leave them in there because they're not really bothering anything. Every once in a while I'll have some aptasia in the main display, but you can see the hair algae is actually sticking out of the rear here and growing in the back of it, and then the bubble algae has just completely taken over. And the reason you really don't want bubble algae in your overflow is because this stuff breaks off very easy. I mean, it doesn't take much to break a good chunk of that off, and that'll go right down your main overflow and clog it right up. So you want to keep bubble algae out of the overflow as much as possible. So I'll be cleaning this up as well. Something you can do to at least slow down or maybe even eliminate the growth of nuisance algae and aptasia in your overflow is to make a cover for it. Maybe put tape over this so that light can't penetrate down deep inside there and cause nuisance algae and aptasia to grow. As I started to scan the tank to see if there were any issues in here, I noticed that the tops of the green acropora were starting to turn white and algae was starting to grow on them. So I'm a little concerned with that. Hopefully, now that I'm back doing normal routine maintenance on the tank, that this will bounce back. But we'll keep an eye on him and see how he does. And then as I cruised around the tank, I looked down. I couldn't believe it, you guys. My clam that I've had for 3 years was reduced to nothing but this empty shell here. Extremely upsetting to have seen this. I was really bummed out about having lost my clam. I've cared for it, watched it grow, nurtured it, and now it's just down to this empty shell, which is very sad. So he's gone, unfortunately. And the other thing that I'm very upset about having lost was my fighting conch snail. I showcased him on a couple of previous videos. Really cool snail. Unfortunately, he didn't make it. And as you look around the sand bed, you could just see a graveyard of crab and snail shells all over the place, especially concentrated down on the side over here. All dead snails and crab. And if you didn't catch it, got cyano growing here and cyano growing here. The good part of it is that it's just in the sand bed. The new build is coming very soon. I'm getting everything put together to start tearing down the 75-gallon tank. So I'm not going to be dosing anything into the tank to remove the cyano. On the few occasions that I had cyano, I used Chemi Clean, I think it was, and that stuff works just awesome. And the last thing that I think was affected by the salinity drop was my anemone garden, I guess you can call it, even though I've never intended to have an anemone garden. It looks like it's been reduced. It's not as full as it used to be, and a few of the anemones actually started going on the move. One back there and there's a couple behind these two corals there that are starting to go on the move. In the new tank, honestly, I'm considering not having anemones at all in the new tank. If I do, I'll just put one in there and see if he can stay on his own little individual island. No guarantees on that, so I don't know what I'm going to do. If I'm just going to try to keep one of these anemones or just go with the tank without any anemones in it at all. Hard decision. These clownfish really love the anemones, so we'll see when we get to that point. Good news is my skunk shrimp made it through the salinity drop. Haven't seen my fire shrimp, and the other shrimp that I had not seen probably in 2 or 3 years, which was seen in the tank, was a pistol shrimp that popped out of one of these rocks and was hanging out in the front of the tank for a little while. I've been looking for them, don't see them. I definitely hear them at night. My German Shepherd Logan, he's super hypersensitive to the clicking sounds. So when the pistol shrimp starts snapping, my dog's ears go back, his head bows down, and he walks out of the room. So he doesn't appreciate the pistol shrimp sounds, and if I end up finding them during the move, I'm going to remove him from the tank and get store credit for him. Here's my very, very sad looking refugium area. The Chaeto is alive. It is green. It is not growing. I haven't harvested this stuff in a very long time, and you can see in the reflection of the light, if I can catch it right, that actually one of the LED bulbs in the light itself is out. So this is in much need of an upgrade, which is coming really soon. Everything else seems to have been doing okay. The coloration's still there. It looks like a couple of corals did grow out, especially these stag type of corals. They've definitely grown, but you can see, we'll take a quick look around the tank and look at some of these corals that are in here. Okay, so obviously drastic salinity drops like the one experienced in my tank are first going to be felt by the inverts. Your snails, your crabs, your clams, your shrimp, all will be affected by that drastic drop in salinity. So as you saw, I lost my clam that I've had for over 3 years. Got him when he was a little guy, watching him grow. Really upset over that. And the fighting conch snail, I was really getting attached to the guy. He was pretty funny, seemed very personable. I'll definitely be getting another one of those once my next tank is all up and running. I also lost, as you saw, my sandbay was littered with shells. So I lost a lot of cleanup crew members, which I have to replace. But all things considering, guys, I was gone for 3 months. My tank is being run off the Apex Classic, and of course, human intervention to do the maintenance on the tank that the Apex can't do. All things considered, I haven't lost any corals, any fish. The tank is doing pretty good. It corrected itself after we added the salinity. Unfortunately, it was too late for some of the animals that I had. But for being gone for 3 months, I don't have any big algae blooms. I don't have death of corals or fish. I didn't come back to a toxic soup of coral soup in my tank, so that was good. All in all, I'm very pleased with the results of having been gone for 3 months. I didn't know what I was going to come home to, but there is another issue that we need to address real quick, because it could also have been a potential disaster if it wasn't caught in time. So let's go down into the garage and into the water making station. A quick glimpse of the tank, the stand, some stuff we got to unbox together later on. 2 tubs here. One's going to be for a makeshift aquarium for the fish, and the other one's going to be for the coral. And then I got 3 of these tubs here, and they're 50-gallon brew containers, and they are on wheels. So I got the other 2 with filled with tap water just to get residue out, and this one's actually mixing some salt water, and I'll fill it up with additional water and get some more salt mix going in there. And it's got a heater and pumps in there as well. So Here's my RODI system, and for those of you guys who are new, you hear the term RO system and then you hear the term RODI system. If you don't understand what the difference in the two are, basically here it is. Take away these two DI cartridges and imagine just this. That would be considered an RO system. Now you add the two cartridges with the DI in them and it becomes an RO/DI system. So if you're new to the hobby, that's all that means. The issue with the RO system was brought to my attention by my wife. This RO system works triple time. It creates RO water into this tank here, and this is sent upstairs to the kitchen sink, and it has a faucet there for just straight up RO water. So that's what it's making there. It also makes the RO water to do water changes. And then the third thing it does, it makes RODI water for the auto top off reservoir upstairs, so I don't have to manually top that off. So my wife came home about 3 weeks before me, and when she was using the RO water faucet upstairs, she noticed that the pressure was really low. So I had her come downstairs, and she was able to see that the RO system was shut down, wasn't running, yet there was about 3 pounds of pressure on the gauge here, which told me that the auto shut off switch, which is this right here, had failed. And I knew that because it's done it before. That auto top off switch, the auto shut off switch gets abused quite a bit because it's running all these different things and it's constantly going on and off, on and off. So it does get abused, and its lifespan is shorter than that of normal. The problem with having even 2 pounds, 3 pounds of water pressure coming out is that it's all going down the waistline. Before it does that, it cycles through your filters and it mucks them all up unnecessarily. So the lifespan of the filters depletes quite rapidly when that happens. I ordered another auto shut off switch and had Matt install it. The problem was these two RO hoses were reversed. And what basically that did was all the water that came from the tap was going through all the filters in the RODI system, meaning that none of it was going down the waistline. So all that water that was supposed to get pushed out through the waistline was getting cycled through all the filters, mucking them up and dirtying them up very, very rapidly. So when I got home, this first stage here was brown from top to bottom, and then this stage here was at the second position, and I swapped them since. You can see this is October 2014, and it's nearly brand new looking, for the exception of a little bit browning right there. And this is the one I just changed out. Now the TDS was still reading 0 going into the mixing bin. So all the water that I still had was still good to go. But had that continued on a while longer, I would have basically had tap water going through the RODI system as if there were no filters in there at all. And the real issue would come when the auto top off wet reservoir started collecting tap water that wasn't properly filtered out and dumping that into the tank to do the to top off the water during evaporation. So when I got home, I figured that out. I saw that no water was going through the waistline when the system was running, and was able to go back to the auto shut off switch and figure out the lines were crossed and fixed it. Unfortunately, I had to replace all of my filters, for the exception of the one that says October 2014, and my membranes. I don't know how much membrane life all that took away from it, but you can see that both membranes were purchased February of this year. So I'll continue monitoring the TDS coming out and make sure everything's up to par. The one good thing that happened is I don't think I've ever done all filters at once. This is typically at around 50 to 55 psi, but after changing out all the filters, the water is flowing through them smoothly, and we're now getting almost over 70 psi, which is awesome. coming straight out of the tap, the PSI is just a hair over 80. So by the time the water makes it through all the filters, the PSI drops about 10 pounds per square inch. I had ordered this pump to boost the pressure going through the RO stages. I just took it out of the box, but after realizing that I'm getting 70 pounds, I'm going to go ahead and send the pump back to BRS. I have done a previous video on how to prepare your system for an extended vacation. I'll put a link up on the screen and also down in the description. In previous times that I've left my system, I had cameras to monitor the system while I was gone. I'd be able to log into the cameras and remotely look into my system through those cameras, and they also had sound, which was awesome, because if you heard anything that was odd, you were able to tell what was going on and relay that to your tank sitter. But when my youngest German Shepherd was only a little puppy, he found those cameras and had his way with them. I found them out in the yard and they were all chewed up and unusable. There were Foscam cameras. If anybody has any suggestions on which cameras to use, especially ones that are compatible with the Apex 2016 or the Apex Fusion website, I like to hear about it, because I'm considering buying new cameras. By no means was this video geared towards being critical of my tank sitter. That would be dumb. I rely on him. He does me huge favors by tank sitting for me, and it relieves me of a lot of stress while I'm gone. But he's human, as we all are, and there is room for human error, even by the most experienced reefers. So my message to you guys after this experience is, whenever you're doing maintenance, no matter how mundane it is, how routine it seems, slow it down. Slow it down. If you don't have time to do the maintenance on that particular day, or you're pressed for time to get it done in a certain amount of time span, then put it off for the next day. It can wait for the next day, to make sure that you have everything dialed in, dotted your I's, and made sure you're being detail oriented during those short few minutes that you got to do the maintenance on the tank to avoid issues. So that'll do it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, hit that thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, follow along with the build, hit that bell to be notified when new videos are released, and we'll see you guys next Sunday. Thanks for watching.